Majid Nawaz is a former Islamic extremist and author of Radical: My Journey Out of Islamist Extremism. Dr. Robert Pape is author of the report, The American Face of ISIS, and is director of Chicago Project on Security and Terrorism. Thanks to both of you for being here tonight. Dr. Pape, I want to start with you first because you have done such in-depth analysis, specifically of ISIS terrorists in the U.S., dating back to 2014. What can you tell us about what we are learning about this suspect?
What we're seeing is almost a paradigm case of an ISIS recruit that has been almost by remote control recruited by ISIS from overseas. We don't see ISIS trying to punch through fighters through immigration cracks in our immigration system. What we see is ISIS orchestrating through social media, online propaganda, and especially video propaganda, detailed attack plans, and also detailed and targeted recruitment appeals. Uzbeks have been specifically targeted by ISIS in multiple videos to glorify would-be Uzbeks who become martyrs in the service of ISIS. And what you're seeing with Saipov is somebody who took ISIS's lead.
And that's what you're hearing, Majid. In the wake of this, officials are saying he followed ISIS's playbook to a T. And
it's even more aggressive than that. You see, ISIS, unlike past terrorist groups, is really targeting its videos to very specific sub-audiences, very specific parts of a population. And what they're doing is producing videos with, in the case of Uzbek speakers, with Uzbeks who have traveled to Syria, who have died in Syria, coming to life in these videos, and then essentially calling for others to come and follow in their footsteps.
So the question is, how do we battle against that? And I want to get to Majid on this because as a former Islamic extremist yourself, you wrote about your journey out of that. If we know the playbook, as officials are saying, he followed it to a T, you're saying they went even further, Dr. Pape, in this scenario. How do we combat it? If we know the playbook, why can't we fight it and stop attacks like this?
Well, partly, Martha, the reason we can't fight it is because we're simply, the frankly simple answer is we're not willing to fight it. And when I say we're not willing to fight it, I say as a society, we often are scared of calling out the Islamist ideology for what it is by name. The president before this one was even unable to name the threat, to call it Islamist extremism for fear of offending Muslims, when actually, surely, if Muslims are the first to say this has nothing to do with us, they also would be standing side by side with those who are able to name this threat and isolate it from mainstream Muslim communities. And so we have this problem that we are, for various reasons of fear of racism, fear of whatever, political correctness, we're unable to even name and isolate and then challenge the threat. And then we've got a separate problem, which is that if we can't name something, we simply don't even have the ability to begin to challenge its propaganda value.
When you say that, Majid, are we even on the right path?
Well, no. I mean, what we've got to recognize is this man who was in Florida, he had, incredibly privileged to come from Uzbekistan to one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And he's in Florida. And for him to turn against a country that was so hospitable to him, it tells us something. It tells us that the strength of the narrative that he subscribed to got to him before the American dream got to him. And that tells us that something's gone wrong with the way in which we are advocating our small L, liberal, secular, democratic principles. We become scared to say that this is a better way of life than the dictatorship that is in Uzbekistan,
Dr. Pape,
from whence he came.
Only a few seconds left. Go ahead.
There's a second reason, which is that local community leaders, including Muslim leaders, really don't know about the strategies ISIS is using in its propaganda. I know because I meet with such leaders here in Chicago, and I study the propaganda, and even though leaders may think they would like to talk people out of it, if they don't know what ISIS is doing, this is a major problem.
And as you say that, as it was just revealed by authorities, 2 cell phones were found. One of them, 90 videos of ISIS propaganda on one of those phones. We have to leave it there. Majid, Dr. Pape, thank you for joining us tonight.